I should not have said it in front of the audit committee, but once the words left my mouth, there was no taking them back. If there's a failure in the Pacific Northwest Division, I said calmly, you can put my name next to it. The room went silent. 7 faces stared at me through the video call window. Senior executives, board members, men who had built careers tearing apart people who made smaller mistakes than the one I had just volunteered for. Thomas leaned forward slowly. "You're not even an employee here, Mr. Wells," he said. His voice had that smooth, careful tone people use when they think someone has just ruined their own life. "You're an outside consultant." "Correct," I replied. "Then I suggest you reconsider the statement you just made." I did. Instead, I looked at the one person in the call who hadn't said a word. Caroline Reynolds, head of the Pacific Northwest Division, my client. And at that moment, the woman whose entire career was about to be dismantled by a committee that had already decided she was guilty. She sat perfectly still in her chair. White blouse, hair pinned back, executive posture flawless. But I had spent the past 3 weeks reviewing thousands of pages of financial records with her. I knew what exhaustion looked like. I knew what fear looked like. And right now it was sitting behind her eyes like a shadow. "The investigation is still ongoing," I continued, my voice even. "Until it's finished, assigning blame would be inefficient." Thomas folded his hands. "And you're confident you can finish this investigation?" "Yes." "How confident?" I paused, then I gave the only honest answer. "Confident enough to put my reputation on it." A few seconds passed, the kind of silence where people start recalculating their strategies. Thomas finally leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said slowly, "then I suppose we'll see whether your confidence is justified." The call ended, the screen went dark, and the moment it did, Caroline exhaled like someone had been holding her underwater. "Lorenzo," she said quietly, "that was reckless." I closed my laptop. It was necessary. She shook her head once. "You don't even work for this company." "Exactly," I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You realize if this audit collapses," she said, "they'll bury both of us." "Only if we're wrong." "And if we're not?" "Then they'll pretend this whole thing was their idea." For a moment she just looked at me. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed, not a polite corporate laugh, a real one, short, tired, almost disbelieving. "You're impossible," she said. "Strategically stubborn," I corrected. She rubbed her temples slowly. "The problem," she said, "is that we're running out of time." "How much?" 72 hours. I nodded once. That was enough. "Then we stop talking," I said, standing, "and start working." 3 hours later, we were standing inside a hotel lobby in downtown Portland. The storm had grounded every flight out of the city. The regional tech conference had filled every hotel within 40 miles, and the concierge was staring at us like we had just asked him to solve a physics equation. "I'm very sorry," he said again, "but the second reservation was canceled during the system error." Caroline leaned against the reception desk, arms folded. "And there's really nothing else available." Marcus shook his head. "Not tonight." I watched Caroline carefully. Most people saw her as confident, commanding, immovable, but right now the weight of the upcoming audit was sitting on her shoulders like concrete, and exhaustion was winning. Marcus cleared his throat. "There is one option." We both looked at him. "The executive suite." Caroline nodded slightly. "That's fine, we'll take it." Marcus hesitated. "There's only one bed." The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds. Caroline glanced at me. Then she said something that made Marcus look even more uncomfortable. "Why waste money on 2 rooms?" Her voice was calm, controlled, professional, but I saw the tension in her fingers resting against the marble counter. She was tired, too tired to care about appearances, too tired to keep pretending everything was under control, so I made the decision immediately. "You're right," I said. Marcus blinked. Caroline looked at me. "I agree," I continued. "We take the suite." Marcus visibly relaxed and started typing, but before he could hand us the keys, I added one more sentence, and I made sure Caroline heard it clearly. If at any point this arrangement feels uncomfortable, I said, you say the word. I met her eyes. I'll get another room. Marcus slid the keycards across the desk, but Caroline didn't pick them up. Not yet. Instead, she studied my face for a moment, like she was trying to figure out something. You didn't hesitate, she said quietly. No. Why? I picked up the keycards. Because right now, I said, the only thing that matters is finishing this audit. Marcus gave us directions to the elevator. We walked across the quiet lobby together. Rain hammered against the glass outside. Caroline finally spoke again once we were alone. You know, she said, most consultants would have refused that arrangement. What? Most consultants, I said, pressing the elevator button, are worried about their reputations. And you're not. I looked at the elevator doors as they opened. I already put my reputation on the line tonight, I said. She stepped inside, so I might as well finish the job. The elevator started rising, 20 floors. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then Caroline asked the question I had been expecting. Why did you really say that in the meeting? What? That you'd take responsibility if the audit fails. I watched the numbers climb, floor 12. Because, I said finally, you didn't create the fraud. She didn't answer, but I could feel her looking at me. And someone, I continued quietly, needs to make sure the people who did don't get away with it. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The hallway was silent. We walked toward the suite together. Caroline stopped when we reached the door. Lorenzo, she said. I turned. You realize something, she said slowly. What? If this weekend goes wrong. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understood perfectly. Her career, my reputation, both hanging on the next 72 hours. I slid the keycard into the lock. The door opened, and neither of us knew yet that the storm outside was about to trap us in that room for the longest weekend of our lives. The door closed behind us with a soft click, and suddenly the quiet felt different, not uncomfortable, just aware. The executive suite was larger than most apartments I'd rented in my 20s. A long glass wall faced the city. Rain streaked across it like someone had dragged silver threads over the skyline. In the center of the room sat a heavy wooden table big enough to hold 6 people. That was good. Work needed space. The bedroom sat behind double doors on the far side. One bed, king size. I set my canvas briefcase on the table and opened it. Laptop, portable monitor, 2 encrypted drives, legal pad, routine, order. Caroline dropped her leather bag onto a chair and slowly rolled her shoulders like someone who had been carrying invisible weight for days. Then she looked toward the bedroom, then back at me. You're not sleeping on the couch, she said. I didn't look up yet. I was already connecting cables. That couch is designed by someone who hates tall people. You noticed. You're 6'2", she said, and I'm not the kind of boss who pretends not to see obvious things. I finished connecting the monitor before answering. I only need 4 hours of sleep. That's not healthy. It's efficient. She crossed her arms. We can share the bed, it's a king. My hands paused for half a second, then I turned to face her. We're adults, she added quickly. I studied her expression, not flirtation, not awkwardness, just pure exhaustion trying to solve a practical problem. Still, some boundaries matter. You're presenting the audit defense, I said calmly. You need real sleep. And you don't. I'll manage. Her jaw tightened slightly. You're stubborn. Strategically. For a moment she looked like she might argue. Then the week caught up with her again. Her shoulders lowered. Fine, she sighed, but I'm buying all the room service. That seems like a fair compromise. She disappeared into the bedroom. The door closed, and the quiet returned. I opened the encrypted vendor database. 4,000 lines of transactions, 3 months of financial reports, thousands of numbers. Somewhere inside them was the truth, and truth leaves patterns, you just have to find them. 42 minutes later I found the first crack. Hidden columns, split invoices, weekend timestamps. Someone had been careful, but not careful enough. I highlighted the cluster on the screen and leaned back slightly. 5 payments, same vendor, Apex Logistics, all under $10,000, just below the board approval threshold. That wasn't sloppy accounting, that was strategy. The bedroom door opened. Caroline walked out wearing gray sweatpants and a thick university hoodie. Her hair was tied into a loose knot now, the polished executive version of her replaced by something much more human. She sat beside me, not close, but close enough to work. How bad? She asked quietly, bad enough to explain the audit. I rotated the monitor slightly toward her. These 5 invoices, I said. Her brow tightened immediately. They're split payments. Yes. To avoid approval triggers. Yes. She leaned closer to the screen. That's illegal. Correct. I opened the attached vendor record. Now look at the tax ID. She squinted, then leaned even closer. That's not formatted correctly. No. Wait. Her eyes widened. That number doesn't exist. Exactly. She leaned back slowly. Phantom vendor. Looks like it. The realization hit her in stages, like watching a storm roll across a horizon. If money had been siphoned through a fake vendor, then the audit committee would assume leadership was responsible, which meant her. I should have caught this, she whispered. No. I took over this division months ago. Yes. And I trusted the reports. That was reasonable. She shook her head. No, it was careless. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. She blinked at me. You didn't build the trap, I said calmly. You just walked into the room where someone else set it. She stared at the screen again. You're very good at preventing panic, she said. Panic wastes time. I slid a stack of printed invoices toward myself. You searched the internal email archives, I said. For what? Anything referencing Apex Logistics. And you? I'll follow the money. Her shoulders straightened slightly. Good. Focus was replacing fear. That's how you win long fights. One small task at a time. 3 hours passed without conversation, just quiet collaboration. Data moving back and forth, timestamps, transaction logs, email chains, the kind of work that looks boring to anyone who doesn't understand that numbers tell stories. Around 1:30 there was a knock at the door. I checked the peephole before opening it. Room service, 2 black coffees, oatmeal, banana. I placed the tray beside Caroline. Eat. I'm fine. Your hands are shaking. She glanced down, they were. She sighed and took the spoon, 2 bites. Then she pushed the second coffee toward me. Black, no sugar, exactly how I take it. You remembered, I said. You've ordered it every night on Zoom calls for 3 weeks. Fair point. She turned back to her laptop. I found something. What? Email from the previous director. I leaned closer. She read it aloud. Procurement process Apex invoices immediately. No secondary verification required. Date: August 14th. I pulled up the wire transfer log. There it is, I said. Money left 12 hours later. Where did it go? Offshore holding account. Her lips pressed together. This is going to be ugly. Truth usually is. At 2 in the morning I noticed her reading the same email again and again, eyes unfocused. The human brain has limits. I saved the database and closed my laptop. The click made her jump. What happened? She asked. Nothing. Did the server crash? No. Then why? It's 2 a.m. I know. You're done. I can't be done. Yes, you can. We still have Q2 reports. I'll handle those. She frowned. You've already been working all night. I've had worse nights. Lorenzo, I'm billing you $400 an hour. She blinked. If you start doing my job, I continued calmly, that's contract interference. For a moment she stared at me, then she shook her head. You're unbelievable. Go to sleep. She stood slowly. Halfway to the bedroom door she stopped. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Not letting me spiral. That would be inefficient. She smiled faintly and disappeared into the bedroom. The door closed, and the room felt different again, quieter. I opened the Q2 reports. Sunrise arrived without ceremony, just pale light through rain clouds. My eyes burned. My chair felt like concrete, but the numbers were finally starting to align. At 7 a.m., the bedroom door opened. Caroline stepped out wearing a hotel robe and holding 2 mugs. She set one beside my laptop. Black coffee again. You didn't sleep, she said. 45 minutes. That's not sleep. It's sufficient. She sat beside me. I rotated the screen. Q2 discrepancy resolved. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Lorenzo. Miscoded depreciation asset. Not fraud. No. She exhaled deeply. You're a miracle worker. I'm an accountant. She laughed, a warm sound, unexpected. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down and the color drained from her face. What is it? I asked. It's Thomas. Explain. She swallowed. The audit committee. Her voice tightened. They moved the audit. How much? She looked up at me. They're starting it today. My brain immediately calculated timelines. How long? She whispered the answer. 5 hours. And suddenly, the weekend we thought we had to save her career had just disappeared. Caroline didn't move for several seconds after she said it. 5 hours. The number just sat there in the air between us. Heavy, unwelcome. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Read the message again. She lifted the phone slowly and scanned the screen. The storm grounded their flights in Seattle, she said. So the committee decided to start the remote audit early. How early? They're requesting file transfer access at noon. I checked the time on my laptop. 7:04 a.m. That meant we had less than 5 hours to organize 3 months of financial evidence into something a hostile board couldn't twist. Without context, the raw files would look terrible. Wire transfers, fake vendor, split invoices. It would look like someone inside the division was laundering money. And the committee already believed that someone was Caroline. They're trying to ambush you, I said. She didn't argue, because she knew it was true. Thomas had never wanted her in the position. She was younger than most division heads, smarter than most of them too. People like Thomas don't like that combination. Caroline pushed her chair back and stood up. Then she started pacing, not frantic, but close. They're going to log in and see incomplete files, she said. They'll flag the division before we can even explain the fraud. We'll explain it. With what? She asked, turning toward me. A half-finished investigation. I watched her carefully. Her breathing was getting shallow again, panic creeping back in. That wouldn't help us, so I stayed seated and calm. Caroline. She stopped pacing. Sit down. For a moment it looked like she might argue again. Then she did it. She sat. I slid my phone face down on the table. A signal nothing else mattered right now. We are not scrambling, I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It feels like scrambling. Because you're looking at the entire mountain. And you're not. No. What are you looking at? The first step. Silence, then she exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. What's step 1? I pulled a legal pad from my briefcase and clicked my pen. We control the narrative. She nodded once. That's always step 1 in a hostile audit. Exactly. I wrote a single line across the top of the page. Apex Logistics, fraud timeline. Then I slid the pad slightly so she could see. They expect us to defend ourselves, I said. So we don't. Her brow furrowed. What do we do instead? We expose the fraud. The shift in her posture was immediate. Executives understand strategy, And this was strategy. If we show the fraud clearly enough, I continued, they can't accuse you without accusing themselves for missing it earlier. She considered that, then nodded slowly. Okay. Step 2, I said, writing again. Evidence chain. What do you mean? Every file we upload needs a timestamp that proves it came directly from the financial server. So they can't accuse us of altering the data. Exactly. She leaned forward slightly. They'll still try. They can try, I said calmly, but I have forensic certification. Her eyes flicked toward me. From the ACF. Yes. If Thomas challenges your digital seal, he challenges the regulatory board. Understanding flashed across her face. He won't risk that. No. For the first time since she read the email. A small spark of confidence returned. I tapped the pen against the legal pad. Now we break the next 4 hours into segments. How small? 15 minutes. Her eyebrows lifted. That's aggressive. That's efficient. I started writing. 800 email acknowledgement to Thomas. She leaned closer. Why would I acknowledge it? Because it removes the power of the ambush. How? You thank him. Her head tilted slightly. For what? His efficiency. A slow smile appeared. You're good at this. I've dealt with hostile committees before. And they hate when their traps don't work. She nodded, okay. Step 2, I continued. Export all Apex wire transfers. Already flagged them. Good. Step 3. Internal email evidence. She pulled her laptop closer again, already halfway through the archive. That's why I like working with you. She smirked slightly, because I'm efficient. Because you don't waste time being offended. That earned a small laugh. Then we got back to work. The hotel suite slowly turned into a command center, laptops humming, documents spreading across the table, rain pounding against the windows. Outside the city looked gray and empty. Inside we were racing a clock. Caroline drafted the written explanation. Sharp, direct. No corporate fluff. She explained exactly how the former director had bypassed financial safeguards. Every sentence was precise. Every accusation backed by evidence. Meanwhile, I built the timeline, transaction, email, wire transfer, offshore account, each piece linked to the next like chain links. By 9:40 a.m. we had something solid, not perfect, but solid. Caroline leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. You know what the worst part is? She said quietly. What? I actually trusted him. The previous director. Yes. That was reasonable. I defended him in meetings, she said, when people questioned the budget increases. I didn't say anything, because she already understood the implication. That means some of them think I helped him. Some of them probably do. She nodded slowly. Great. Fortunately, I said, their opinions aren't evidence. She looked at me again. You're very calm for someone who tied his reputation to this investigation. I like puzzles. This isn't a puzzle. Everything is a puzzle, I said. You just need the right pattern. She watched me for a moment, then something softened in her expression. You know something, she said. What? When we first started working together. Yes, I thought you were cold. That's fair. But you're not. No. No. What am I then? She thought about it, steady. That word hung in the air, steady, not impressive, not charming, just steady, for some reason. It felt like the best compliment I'd received in years, before I could answer. The lights flickered, once, twice. Then everything went dark, the laptop stayed on, battery power. But the room itself dropped into silence. No refrigerator hum, no ventilation, just rain against the windows. Caroline slowly turned toward me. Tell me that's temporary. I checked the network icon. A red X blinked back at me. No Wi-Fi, I said. She grabbed her phone. No signal either. The storm had taken the power grid, which meant the hotel routers were offline and the cellular towers were overloaded. We were completely cut off. Caroline stood up slowly and walked to the window. The city below looked dim, emergency lights flickering across blocks of downtown. That's it then, she said quietly. I stood and walked beside her, not touching, just standing there. You gave up a lot for this job, I said. She let out a breath. I missed my sister's wedding planning dinner last week. That's not the wedding. No, she said softly, but it's one of the many things I've missed. She folded her arms around herself. I thought if I worked hard enough. Her voice trailed off. If you were flawless, I finished. They couldn't take it away. She nodded. That was the theory. I checked the clock. 11:28 a.m. 32 minutes left. Plenty of time if we adapted. We don't need flawless, I said. She looked at me. What do we need? The truth. I walked back to the table and picked up my phone, even without data. Basic SMS sometimes pushes through damaged networks. Caroline watched me. What are you doing? Changing the battlefield. I typed a message to Thomas, a formal declaration, as an independent certified auditor, stating that the fraud investigation was complete, that the files were secured offline due to a power outage, and that any disciplinary action taken before network restoration would be reported to the ethics board as bad faith. My thumb hovered over the send button. Caroline whispered, "Lorenzo." I pressed send. The message crawled slowly across the screen, one tiny bar of signal, then another, then. Delivered. I set the phone down. The ambush is neutralized. She stared at me. You just threatened the audit committee. No, I said calmly. I warned them. And for the first time all morning. Caroline smiled. For a few seconds after the message delivered, neither of us spoke. Caroline was still staring at my phone, like it might explode. You realize, she said slowly, that Thomas is going to be furious. That's acceptable. You just accused the audit committee of acting in bad faith. I accused them of potentially acting in bad faith. She folded her arms. That's a legal difference. It's a very important one. She let out a quiet breath through her nose. You're either very brave or very reckless. I'm very precise. The room stayed dim, lit only by the gray daylight coming through the windows and the glow from our laptop screens. Outside, the storm was still tearing through the city. Wind rattled the glass. Rain streaked sideways. Caroline walked back to the table and sat down slowly. So what happens now? She asked. We wait. For the power. For the network. And if it doesn't come back? I looked at the clock. 11:32 a.m. 28 minutes before the committee expected the files. They won't move without evidence, I said. You sound very confident about that. I sent a message that creates legal risk for them. And people like Thomas avoid legal risk. She studied me carefully. You've done this before. Yes. How many times? Enough. Her eyes moved to the legal pad on the table, the timeline, the evidence chain, pages of notes. You really thought this through, she said quietly. I try. A few seconds passed, then she spoke again. Lorenzo. Yes. Why did you take this case? The question surprised me. You hired my firm. That's not what I asked. I leaned back in the chair slightly. Most consultants refuse the project. That's true. They said the division was too messy. Yes. And yet you said yes immediately. I looked at the rain sliding down the window, because the numbers didn't make sense. That's it. That's enough for me. She watched me like she was trying to read something deeper, but I didn't offer more. Instead, I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The silence stretched. Finally, Caroline stood again and walked to the window. The city below looked half asleep, traffic lights blinking, emergency vehicles moving slowly through wet streets. I spent 10 years getting to this position, she said quietly. I know. And all it takes is one bad narrative. That's true. She rested one hand against the glass. They were ready to destroy me. Yes. You didn't even hesitate to stand in front of that. No. She turned toward me. Why? For a moment I considered giving the safe answer, professional duty, contract obligations, corporate ethics, but those weren't the real reasons, so I told her the truth. Because you're honest. She blinked. That's it. That's rare. She looked down for a second, then she laughed softly. You have a very unusual moral compass. I have a practical one. And honesty is practical. In the long run, yes. She walked back to the table again, then she noticed something. You didn't sleep, she said. I rested. You closed your eyes for 45 minutes. That counts. You're running entirely on coffee. That also counts. She shook her head. You're impossible. Consistent. She sat again, then leaned forward slightly. You know something else, she said. What? You didn't have to threaten Thomas. Yes, I did. Why? Because someone needed to remind him the audit works both ways. She frowned. What do you mean? If he suspends you without reviewing the evidence, I explained, he becomes responsible for ignoring certified forensic data. Her eyes widened slightly. That would trigger an ethics review. Yes. She leaned back again. So you didn't just block the ambush. No. You made it dangerous for him. That was the idea. For the first time since the blackout. Caroline looked relaxed, not safe but steady. Then the lights flickered again, once, twice. And suddenly the suite flooded with light. The refrigerator hummed back to life. Air conditioning kicked on. Caroline turned toward the router on the desk. One green light, then another. Wi-Fi. Lorenzo, she whispered. I was already opening my laptop. Go. She didn't ask what I meant. She just moved. Laptop open. Compliance portal loading. Password, two-factor authentication. I plugged the encrypted drive into my computer and began pushing the files. Transaction logs, email chains, bank confirmations. The upload bar crept forward. 2%, 5%, 10%. The clock read 11:44 a.m. 16 minutes left. Caroline typed faster than I'd ever seen. Her executive summary filled the screen. Clear, direct. Brutally honest, she wasn't defending herself. She was documenting a crime. Timeline ready, I said. Uploading attachments, she replied. 20%, 34%, 52%. The rain outside softened slightly. The storm was finally moving east. But inside the room the tension had only one focus. The progress bar, 68%, 74%. The system paused, both of us froze. Come on, she whispered. Then the upload resumed. 81%, 90%, 95%. Caroline held her breath. 11:58 a.m. the screen flashed. Submission confirmed. The portal locked the files. Timestamp verified. Caroline slowly leaned back in her chair. The tension drained from her shoulders so quickly it was almost visible. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then she let out a long breath. We did it. You did it, I corrected. You built the entire investigation. I organized it. That's not the same thing. I shrugged slightly. The room felt strangely quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes. Outside the clouds were starting to break, light slipping through in thin lines. Caroline rubbed her hands over her face. Now we wait, she said. Yes. And if the committee still tries something. They won't. You're very sure. I am. She studied me again. You know something, Lorenzo. What? You never sound like you're guessing. That's because I don't guess. So what do you do? I look for patterns. And what pattern do you see right now? I closed my laptop slowly. That the truth is about to ruin someone's day. Her smile returned, small but real. and for the first time since the storm began, the weekend finally felt like it might end in victory. But neither of us knew yet that the hardest conversation between us hadn't happened yet. The call came 4 hours later. By then the storm had almost disappeared. Sunlight was finally cutting through the clouds outside the glass wall. Portland looked washed clean, streets shining, traffic moving again. Inside the suite, the adrenaline had faded, which left a strange quiet behind. Caroline sat across from me at the table, staring at the compliance portal like it might suddenly change its mind. "It's been 4 hours," she said. "Yes. That feels like a long time." "It is. For audit committees it is." I took a slow sip of coffee. "They're reviewing forensic logs. That should take less time. Not if they're looking for ways to challenge them." She sighed. "I hate this part. The waiting." "Yes. That's because you prefer solving problems." "I do. And this problem is already solved." "Then why hasn't Thomas called?" "Because he's figuring out how to explain the situation without admitting he tried to ambush you." She watched me carefully. "You really think that's what's happening?" "Yes. And you're calm about it." "I told you earlier," I said, "I like patterns." She leaned back in her chair and studied the ceiling for a moment. "You know what the strangest part of this weekend is?" "What?" "You." "That's vague. I hired a consultant." "You did. And instead I got whatever you are." "An accountant." She shook her head. "No." "What then?" She thought about it. "An anchor." That word again. Anchor, something steady in a storm. I looked away from her for a moment. Compliments are easier to ignore when you don't make eye contact. Before I could respond, her phone rang. The screen lit up. "Thomas." Caroline straightened immediately. Her posture changed, executive mode returning. She tapped the speaker button and placed the phone on the table between us. "Thomas," she said calmly. His voice came through the speaker, tired, defeated. "Caroline," he said, "the committee has completed its review." Neither of us spoke. "The forensic documentation submitted by Mr. Wells has been verified." Caroline glanced at me briefly, then back at the phone. "The findings confirm that the financial irregularities originated under the previous regional director." "Yes," she said evenly. "There is no evidence of involvement by current leadership." Silence. Then Thomas continued. "The board will be pursuing legal action against the former director." I leaned back in my chair. Caroline remained perfectly still. "The Pacific Northwest Division is cleared," he finished. "The audit is officially closed." Caroline didn't celebrate, didn't sigh, didn't relax. Instead, she answered in the same steady tone she'd used all weekend. "Thank you, Thomas. We will issue formal documentation Monday." "I'll expect it." Then she ended the call. The room went quiet, not the tense quiet from earlier, a different one. The quiet that comes after something heavy finally falls away. Caroline stared at the table for a moment. Then she looked at her phone again. Her calendar was still open. She whispered something under her breath. "My sister's wedding." I glanced at the screen. Saturday night, out of state. The rehearsal dinner had been yesterday. The ceremony was tonight. She shook her head slowly. "I promised her I'd be there." "You still can." She looked up. "It's 3 hours away. There's a flight at 6:40. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "How do you know that?" I turned my phone toward her. "Flight schedule. Already open." "And before you say anything," I added, scrolling slightly, "a florist near the venue is holding a white arrangement in her colors." She stared at the screen, then at me. "You planned this." "I planned for the possibility." "Why?" "Because people regret missing important moments." Her voice softened. "You didn't have to do that." "No." For a moment she didn't speak. Then she stood, walked slowly around the table, stopped in front of me. I stood too. There are moments when people celebrate loudly. This wasn't one of them. Caroline wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her forehead against my chest. The movement was sudden enough that my brain paused for half a second. Then instinct took over. My arms came around her back, not tight, just steady. Her breathing was shaky at first, then it slowed. The tension she'd been carrying all weekend finally leaving her shoulders. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence felt full instead of empty. After a minute, she stepped back slightly, looked up at me. We did it. You did it. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You could have walked away from this case. Yes. You didn't. No. Why? There it was again, that question. Why? I considered the answer, then gave the honest one. Because the first time we spoke, I said quietly, you told me something important. What? You said the numbers should always tell the truth. She blinked slightly. I remember that. Most executives say numbers should support the narrative. And I didn't. No. And that mattered to you. Yes. Her expression softened again. Lorenzo, she said quietly, yes. You're a strange man. I've been told. But I'm glad you took the case. So am I. For a moment we just stood there, the city outside bright now. The storm completely gone. Finally Caroline stepped back. We should pack, she said. Yes. And I should go to my sister's wedding. Yes. But before that. She hesitated slightly, then smiled. You're buying dinner on the flight. That seems fair. After all, she said, walking back toward the bedroom, you did threaten an audit committee for me. I warned them. She laughed softly, and for the first time all weekend. The tension between us wasn't about work anymore. It was about something neither of us had said yet. Something that had been quietly building between spreadsheets, coffee cups, and storm clouds. And it wasn't finished, not even close. Sunday morning felt strangely calm. No storm, no deadlines, no clock counting down. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that arrives after 2 days of pressure finally released their grip. Caroline moved slowly around the suite gathering her things, zippers closing, laptop sliding into her bag, the heavy stack of printed documents disappearing back into folders. For the first time all weekend, no one was rushing. I closed my briefcase and stood near the window for a moment. Portland looked different now, clean, bright, like the storm had washed the entire city clean. Behind me, Caroline spoke. You know what the strangest part of all this is? What? I don't remember most of yesterday. That's normal. For crisis situations. Yes. Why? Your brain filters everything except the problem. She nodded thoughtfully. That explains why it feels like the weekend lasted 6 months. That's also normal. She zipped her bag and looked at me. You're very comfortable with chaos. I prefer structure. But chaos is where you work best. I considered that, maybe. She studied me for a moment longer. You're hard to read. That's intentional. I figured. We walked out of the suite together. The hallway was quiet. The elevator ride down felt longer than the one 2 nights earlier. Neither of us spoke, not because there was tension, but because something had shifted. Work was finished, which meant the space between us wasn't filled with spreadsheets anymore. The lobby looked different without the storm pressing against the glass. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Marcus was still behind the reception desk. He recognized us immediately. Good morning, Miss Reynolds. Good morning, Marcus. He typed quickly as she approached, checking out. Yes. He printed the receipt and slid it across the marble counter. Everything on one bill. Caroline paused, then she shook her head. Actually, she said, could you split the incidentals? Marcus nodded. And Mr. Wells will need a copy of the receipt for his records. Marcus typed again. I stood beside her quietly. Then Caroline reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a brass key, old, heavy. She placed it on the counter in front of me. Marcus looked confused. I looked at the key, then at her. "My office," she said calmly. "The spare key." The meaning landed immediately. Not dramatic, not romantic, just practical, an invitation into her world, a quiet sign of trust. "We share a very strict calendar moving forward," she added lightly. I picked up the key. The metal felt cool against my fingers, then I slid it into my pocket. "I'll sync our schedules on the flight," I said. Marcus handed us the receipts. "Thank you for staying with us." We stepped toward the revolving glass doors. Outside, the city was alive again, cars moving, people walking. The world continuing like the storm had never happened. Just before we reached the doors, I stopped. Caroline stopped with me. She looked at me expectantly. I turned slightly and offered my hand, not grabbing, just open. She looked down at it for half a second, then placed her hand in mine. Her grip was firm, confident, like it had been all weekend when the pressure was highest. But now there was something else inside it, something quieter, warmer. We walked forward together until the glass doors were a few feet away. Then I stopped again. Caroline looked up at me. Her fingers tightened slightly around mine. She didn't say anything. She just gave a small nod, permission, acknowledgement, maybe both. I leaned down and kissed her, not rushed, not dramatic, just simple. Like signing your name on a page you've already read carefully. When we stepped back, neither of us said anything for a moment. The city noise drifted in through the opening doors. Caroline smiled, not the confident executive smile she used in meetings, not the tired smile from the middle of the storm. This one was different, real. "You know something, Lorenzo," she said softly. "What?" "I spent years believing stability meant doing everything alone. And now," she squeezed my hand once, "now I think stability means knowing someone will stand beside you when the structure starts to shake." I nodded slightly. "That's a good definition." She glanced toward the street where a taxi was waiting. "My flight leaves in 3 hours. You should go. You're coming to the wedding reception later, right?" "I wouldn't miss it." She tilted her head slightly. "You're very confident about that." "I already bought the ticket." She laughed quietly, then she leaned closer. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For the weekend." I shook my head slightly. "You built the career," I said. "I just helped keep the paperwork clean." She smiled again, then stepped through the revolving doors. The sunlight caught her hair as she walked toward the waiting taxi. Halfway there, she turned back, raised her hand, and for the first time since we met, she looked completely at peace. I stood there for a moment watching her drive away. Then I slipped my hand into my pocket. The brass key was still there, solid, simple, real. Some people think love arrives like lightning, sudden, loud, but that isn't how it works most of the time. Most of the time it arrives quietly, between long nights of work, between shared silence, between two people choosing to stand steady while everything else shakes. Because the truth is, some promises don't need dramatic words. They just need someone who stays. And that weekend, we both did.